Red Christmas is yet another Christmas-themed horror film that I have seen in 2017, and it's still only October, so I'm not sure why any of these guys aren't waiting to release them until closer to the holidays, but it is what it is. The first one I saw this year was The Amazing Secret Santa. I reviewed it here. I also reviewed Better Watch Out, which was like only 2 weeks ago, so this is pretty close together. And I was pretty meh about that. This is an interesting one because I went into this knowing literally nothing about it except for that it was a Christmas themed horror movie and that Dee Wallace from Cujo and The Howling and Critters, Dee Wallace, was in it to some capacity. I was like, is she going to be a cameo? Is she not? So, as I said, completely blind. But, that being said, because it is a Christmas themed horror film and it looked like an 80s slasher throwback from the cover and whatnot, I was expecting this movie to be more silly and more, playful and comedy before horror, or like a 50-50. This movie is nothing like that. This movie is a tragic tale. Like, I was not expecting that in the slightest. It is a downer. Now, it is a horror movie, and it definitely plays out like a slasher, but it isn't run-of-the-mill. It isn't just a guy is, stalking camp counselors or babysitters. Like, this movie very much has a very tragic tale to the killer. And honestly, I cared much more about the killer in this movie than I did any of the characters. So, did I like this movie? Yes, I did. I liked it a lot. I had my problems with it, but I was so blown away by how serious this movie was and how much it actually affected me at times. Like, it really got to me in moments. There's a lot of drama and a lot of heartache in this movie, and I felt a decent amount of it. Now, it is a low budget feature, and a decent amount of the actors aren't that great, but the subject matter at hand here and the way some of it is delivered actually it actually got me. Now, I know a lot of people out there are like, when they go to their slasher movies, they don't want any kind of character development. They don't give a shit about characters. They just want to see, tits. And I say this a lot, but it's true. I see it in the comment section on my videos. I've seen it in talking to the horror fans over the many years I've been a fucking fan of this genre. People don't want, story with their slasher films. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. But I think if that is who you are, I don't think you'll like this movie. It does have some really good kills, and I think I'll just kind of get into this movie. Now, if you want to avoid any kind of spoilers at all, go into it completely blind, except for now it's tragic. But besides that, if you want to go into it completely blind, I guess shut it off here, come back to it later if you watch it. But so I'm going to talk about small spoilers, just, a brief synopsis and whatnot. This movie starts in an abortion clinic. It's already off to a real happy start, right? And this guy comes in and bombs the abortion clinic, and there's people fighting on either side. It's obviously during, a time when people were outside protesting, and one side saying that they are for it and against it, blah, blah, blah. And then we fast forward like 20 years in the future, and this family is having a Christmas get-together, and this deformed man in basically a shroud, who he kind of looks like the Grim Reaper, shows up at the door wanting to read them a letter. And they, obviously they show a baby in the beginning who's in the little pot, and he's obviously the aborted baby, and I'm sure you can figure out why he's there. Now, I think that we're a decent amount of audience, even people who would be into a movie like this with a little bit more drama, where I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to think that this is a movie with an anti-abortion agenda. And I just don't see it that way. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, the director could be completely, Christian and hardcore against abortion and whatever. Or I should say religious. But I just felt that it was a very dramatic plot element. And as I said, it worked for me. So I get why people would think that, but I personally don't think that that's the truth. So now, things that I liked about this movie, I liked that abortion clinic opening. It just kind of set a really dark, grim tone to this movie, and that was the right tone to set, because the rest of this movie is pretty much the same. It's very depressing and dark, much like the opening is. So I like the tone that it set. And like the title card had that very 1970s look to it. The music matched as well. I'll get into the music thing, into my negatives as well, but that opening music was really good. Now, as I said, there are kills in this and gore, and I think pretty much almost every kill in the movie is on screen. A couple are off screen, but most of them are, and they look really good. It was kind of dark and quick and whatnot, so I couldn't tell what of it was practical versus, some kind of CGI enhancements, but there was some that looked fantastic. One with a blender, you'll see. If you watch this, that was like, oh wow, like that looked awesome. That was nutty. That was a good one. Another thing I really enjoyed about this movie was the lighting scheme. It reminded me of the movie Cube a little bit, where each individual room within the house is a different, vibrant color tone. Like the palette used in this movie, you walk into one room and it's completely red, because he cuts the power and all they can light the house with is Christmas lights, basically. And I don't know why one room would then be red and one room, whatever the reason, I don't give a shit. One room was like red, and one room was like blue, and one room, and then when they were walking down the hallway, there would be this background light that'd be shining out of one room, and you'd be in that foreground light of the all-encompassing color of the front room, and the contrast between the colors was really visually appealing to the eye. So I really, really did like the use of color here. Anytime you use, because there's so many different ways to appeal to the audience, and it doesn't always have to be with kills and chicks and this and that. You can really amplify a film just by the use of lighting, and especially if you use vibrant colors. I mean, obviously look no further than Suspiria for my my point there. I like the girl, the character's name is Hope, who was adorably beautiful. She has a shirt on. I couldn't really read what exactly it said, but it said, ho, 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 now I have a something. I couldn't read that bottom part, but I'm sure obviously you know what that is, but if you don't, it's a Die Hard reference. This movie is shot in Australia, and I think that another thing I want to say here definitely is that this film relies heavily on you giving a shit about the villain, which his name is Cletus. Fuck, it's hard to call him a villain. I mean, he is, obviously, but if you have to care about his story, you absolutely have to give a shit. If you don't care about Cletus's story, you will not care about this movie. You could just fast forward to the kills and be done with it. But yeah, so now getting into my dislikes. First and foremost, besides Cletus, which is, kind of the opposite of how it's supposed to be, I think. I don't know if this is what they were going for or not, but I didn't like anybody else. Like, Cletus, I felt bad for. Was he a murderer and a piece of shit for doing that kind of stuff? Sure. But I kind of got where he was coming from in a way. The other characters were just shitty. Like, I didn't really give a fuck about anybody. And it wasn't just because they weren't developed. A few of them were, and they just had shitty qualities to them, to where it was kind of like, give a fuck if you die. And as I said, now that could be fuel for the anti-abortion message. And I can see that because these people are shitty. And, so I don't know. But nobody, I didn't care about a fuck one of them. As I said, the Hope character was cute as shit, but I really didn't think much of her either outside of that. One of the problems I was having, and this is purely on me, this has nothing to do against the film, is that Cletus he sounds a little too much like, if you've ever seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, I bring that show up a lot. There's an episode called Pod People, and there's a character in that movie called Trumpy, and the guys who are making fun of the... If you have no idea what the show is, you're going to have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about right now, so just bear with me. But they make fun of movies. That's the whole premise of that show. And the voices that they gave Trumpy in the movie as they were mocking the character doesn't actually speak in the movie, but they're speaking for him and making up his voice. And it's such a silly voice, but it sounded just like Cletus, and I just could not stop thinking it was Trumpy. If Daniel's watching, he'll know exactly what I'm talking about, since we talk about that episode a lot together. Something I forgot about in my positives, and this is a big one, I don't know why I missed this, is they have a actor with Down syndrome in this movie. And he's excellent. And I'm not just saying that because it's like, oh, he's mentally handicapped, so you got to give him some praise, and I'm such a cool dude for acknowledging. No. He was awesome in this movie. Like, he had some of the best acting in this movie. And his character wasn't just thrown in there, because they were trying to, kind of like what I was just saying, like, they weren't trying to be like, oh, well, we threw a handicapped person in here, like, give us some credit for that. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like they just threw him in for no reason. Like, him being mentally handicapped and having Down syndrome played into the story, and it wouldn't have been able to work without him. Could they have written it different to not have him included and whatnot? Yeah, but I'm so glad that they did, because it works so well to the story of Cletus and what he's going through and what has happened to him and what's going on between Dee Wallace, Cletus, and the kid, the mentally handicapped kid. So, man, what a fantastic performance there, for real. And I guess on the flip side of that, some of the characters acting in this movie wasn't that great. And their reactions to things and character decisions within the film, which is always a big problem of mine and pretty much anyone who watches these movies, were just irritating. But that's not an acting problem. That's just a writing problem. So there were some stupid decisions made, but I guess I could argue too on the flip side of that, because I really didn't like their characters much at all, that I saw their acting as a little bit more subpar than maybe it was. But I don't think so. I think it was just like kind of subpar acting. But it's a low budget movie, although it happens to look pretty great for being as low budget as it is, to be honest. And I felt like the pacing was a little off. Like, I felt like the first 45 minutes or so, like, moved along at a brisk pace. Like, it felt like it was well constructed. And then, like, from that point on till almost the end, it just felt like it was draggy. And I think that's because it was mostly focusing on the unlikable characters, so it was kind of a chore to watch. But anytime Cletus was on screen, I really enjoyed. Obviously the kills, as I said, but when it's more of the family drama and they're hiding in the house and whatnot, that just tended to drag, and that was a bummer. Because I did think outside of that, like anything that was happening with Cletus, anything that was happening with Cletus and Dee Wallace, and especially, as I said, the kid with Down syndrome, all of that was fabulous. Like if the whole movie was just those three characters, I think I would have enjoyed it much more. The other characters almost felt like filler. They needed to be there for the story told. Not all of them, but at least a couple outside voices, just to heighten the tension between the family. But I just kind of wish that I liked the characters more. So yeah. Make sure I got everything here. Oh, there's a scene in this movie where like a couple, this is a whole family, like everyone is, it's either like a daughter or that brings their husband or whatever. So it's all one family and they're all in one house together, and a couple decides to go off, like their daughter and her husband decide to go off into the bathroom and fuck. During the day, during Christmas lunch, and fuck loudly. Like moaning out loud. Come on. Like really? This is not like some hillbilly fucking redneck family backwoods shit. This was like a proper good old American, even though this was filmed in Australia. It still felt, I think because of Dee Wallace. But it was just like, really, they'd be fucking loudly in the bathroom at their mom's house during Christmas, during the day when everyone's literally like 20, 30 feet away. And then like the dad walks by and hears them fucking in there and just finds it funny. Like that scene was stupid. I know that everyone reacts in different ways, and movies are supposed to be ridiculous and you're not supposed to. That was stupid. Anyway, final thoughts. I think you already know everything I had to say about this movie, but I was really shocked at how much the drama actually affected me. I really felt some moments of this film, and going into this thinking this was going to be another fucking Santa sleigh or like oh man, I've seen so many Christmas horror movies when I'm sitting here thinking about it, and most of them are silly. Oh yeah, I saw All Through the House this year too. That's the fourth. Jesus, I've seen a lot of Christmas horror movies set within the year or two. So anyway, all right, signing off. I've talked and rambled on for too goddamn long.